The following account was sent to me by someone by the name of Luke. He states that this is not his real name, but swears that what he writes is true. You be the judge. I was one of the microbiologists working on a secret project funded by the military in an undisclosed location outside of Seattle, Washington. We were at the time working on a virus that would combine human DNA with animal DNA, which, if successful, would bestow extraordinary abilities upon human beings. Strain 13 was the beta name given to the virus, but the military code name for it was Project Excalibur. The research was being conducted at a large compound close to Duwamish River along the Puget Sound, Washington. The compound was surrounded by a high barbed wire fence and patrolled by the military. The military had already invested a significant amount of money into this specific project, but was on the verge of failure due to the fact that the virus was not living up to its potential. Although it had been running for 3 years now, the project had very little success in transforming any of the animal test subjects into anything other than deformed mutants. The only animal used in our experimentation that was ever truly changed was a pig. But it did not become the species that we had anticipated it would become. Instead, the pig grew long hair and 2 extra legs as a result of the mutation. It maintained its identity as a pig, but rather than getting the pig to stand up and walk on 2 legs, it walked on all 6, as if at once, like a crab. Luke goes on to say that his colleagues came to the conclusion that the virus did not function as expected on rats and pigs. They came to the conclusion that it would be best to shift their focus and investigate other kinds of animals. Following a lengthy discussion, it was eventually decided that the pig should be let loose in the forested area that was located directly behind the compound. We were interested to see if the natural world would or could accomplish what we had been trying to do. Could nature become the change agent for us? After affixing a tracking device, we continued to monitor its whereabouts over the course of several days. Then, the tracking device suddenly ceased transmitting, which was a surprise. A small hunting party was then dispatched. Upon locating the specimen, they discovered a black bear devouring what was left. We were interested in finding out if whether or not the virus from the pig had spread to the bear. Therefore, we instructed the group to tranquilize the bear with a tranquilizing shot and bring it back to the compound. The sedative that was used on it was also a very effective muscle relaxant, which should have had a negative impact on the virus. They reported that the bear required more than just 1 dose in order to be rendered unconscious. Had the virus been passed to the bear? It's possible that this is why it took more than 1 dose of the sedative to put the bear to sleep finally. Whatever the cause, we immediately realized that a portion of the experiment had been successful. After the sedative had a chance to take effect, researchers brought the bear back to the laboratory and we began our examination. We shaved off a portion of the bear's fur, taking samples of blood and skin. It is also confirmed that the virus had been transmitted from the pig to the bear, but only a remnant of strain 13 was discovered. Afterward, it was decided that the bear would be given a full dose of the strain 13 virus in order to carry out the experiment. We placed the bear in a very controlled setting. A cage was built and placed in a large open room. On top of the cage was a container filled with the virus, with 2 tubes extending down to the feed trough. Every time the bear went to eat, the tubes would release the virus underneath its snout. Our goal was to determine the extent to which the virus could be spread through the consumption of food. While we watched, the bear began to eat, and the virus began to drip from its snout. However, the bear licked it up before it could fall, and the animal maintained this behavior until the virus in the tubes was completely depleted. Luke reported that they watched for a few hours, but no noticeable changes occurred. They were on the verge of giving up when the bear began shaking its head in a manner consistent with having been stung by a bee. The bear began to show symptoms of the virus's infection. It began to show signs of agitation. The bear soon began to scratch at the cage, biting on the bars. Then, it began to walk around on its hind legs, growling ferociously as it walked around its cage, looking for a way to escape. The bear started to shake violently and uncontrollably and began having tremors. It also began to gnaw at its lower limbs and scratch at its face with its claws. It was decided that the bear would need to be sedated in order to prevent it from coming to any further harm. The bear was put under sedation for days at a time. The bear would also have convulsions while under anesthesia's effects. The bear's external appearance would begin to morph with each convulsion that it undergoes. The two most significant aspects were the gradual reduction in the thickness of its body and its continued increase in length. After 2 weeks, we let the bear awake. It was no longer recognizable as a typical black bear at all. It had taken on the appearance of something far different, a strange beast. It was not a bear in the traditional sense because the virus had transformed it more than any other tested animals. The bear had become considerably larger, and its previously soft skin had developed a brittle, armor-like quality. It had evolved into a creature that walked primarily on 2 legs, and those legs were significantly longer than they would have been normally. The bear no longer possessed its claws. Its fur had been replaced by long hair covering its entire body. It had a shorter snout, and overall, it had seemed to take a new appearance. We were ecstatic, but soon the celebration ended, and reality set in. It became hard to keep the animal in captivity. It tried to break through any enclosure that they could build for it. We made the decision to let the creature loose, attach a transmitter just like we did with the pig, and observe how it behaves. The cage was removed and from the secure area placed outside the compound. The door was opened and a few pieces of food were tossed out in front in order to draw the animal out from the cage. It left the cage and strolled calmly into the woods behind the compound. We monitored as the animal with a distinct appearance moved deeper into the forest. To our surprise, it stayed in the woods until nightfall, and then it quietly moved back towards the compound in search of a meal. Scaling the 8-foot fence with ease, it soon discovered the garbage bins and feasted on the scraps left behind by careless workers. The animal was comfortable in its new environment, and it became a nocturnal scavenger that made the garbage bins its home. This behavior continued for weeks. The creature had already grown to a larger size, and its appearance was continuing to transform. Hunters had reported seeing it in the woods, or they referred to it as a Bigfoot-like creature. Despite the fact that it was not a Bigfoot, it is a bear whose DNA has been spliced together with human genes. A few of the other animals that lived in close proximity to the compound also started to display obvious signs of transformation. They had longer facial hair, and a slight pointiness could be seen in some of their teeth. Was this strain 13? After taking blood samples from a number of these smaller animals, it was determined that strain 13 had, in fact, impacted the bodies of those animals. The fact that they carried only half of the virus in their bodies did not prevent them from being infectious, but we didn't know how the virus was being transmitted. It was decided that a team would be dispatched to the woods in order to install surveillance equipment and wait there for several days. Their mission was to keep an eye out and document any changes taking place with other animals that lived in the area surrounding their compound. On the first evening, they noticed a young raccoon eating garbage out of the same cans that were located behind the building that housed all the research laboratories. They decided to sedate the raccoon, taking a blood sample because of how strangely it was acting, and it would not leave the garbage alone. The findings indicated that the raccoon did, in fact, harbor strain 13, and there were indications that transformation was taking place in its body. The raccoon was also then released with a monitoring device attached. After 2 more nights passed, a disturbance could be heard coming from the direction behind one of the buildings. When we ran outside to investigate what had occurred, we discovered that the raccoon had been slaughtered and the bear-like creature was consuming its body. We once again captured it, confining it back to the cage. When tensions began to arise among the team, they were not expecting anything like this to occur. Some decided to give up on the project altogether, but others wanted to continue the research. And it would not be long before they were ready for the first human test. The following week, the scientists finally felt confident enough to allow strain 13 to be injected into a human subject. Much to my dismay, we had recruited a homeless man from the streets of downtown Seattle to ensure that nobody would miss him if something tragic were to occur. The virus was administered via injection to the man, and he was closely monitored. His behavior, his physical symptoms, any indication that the virus was to have an effect. The man died unexpectedly within 12 hours. His body was buried in a small cemetery located behind the compound, along with the bodies of other test subjects. The following night, they decided to give it another try on a human. They brought in a young woman from the streets of Seattle, where they had found their first. This time, they sedated her first before injecting the virus. Over the course of several weeks, they began to notice a gradual change in her appearance. She started growing taller, her body began to broaden, her skin becoming tighter and tougher, and she began growing hair all over, and her teeth were also growing to a point. Now, certain that the virus was working, we had also discovered something else about strain 13. Sometimes the woman would go into a dormant state and sleep for multiple days. She had been sleeping for 2 days at this point when it was decided to let her sleep for one more night. They would awake her. The following morning, when I had arrived, I noticed that the security around the compound was more intense than usual, but I had been allowed to pass through without any problems. When I arrived at my building, I noticed the large cage which held the creature was now empty, and later that day, the other scientist informed me that the creature and the woman had escaped during the night. They began to suspect that the woman had let the creature out and snuck away. That was why guards were posted at every building entrance and exit. They were prepared in case the creature would try and return. I decided to take an in-depth look at the cage later that evening when everybody else had gone, and I was the only one left. When I opened the cage door, the only thing that I noticed inside were some large tracks that were laid out on the floor. They led out of the building to the area behind the compound, where the tracks ended at a boundary fence. I exited the compound on foot, proceeding to walk along the perimeter of the fence until reaching the location where the footprints had ended on the other side. I could also see prints on the other side of the ground, both human and bear alike. They disappeared into a nearby clump of trees that was surrounded by bushes. As I followed the prints into the brush, I found the monitoring device that had been attached. That was when we heard a loud noise coming from behind that same clump of trees. It sounded like the snorting of an angry bear, turning and evolving into a loud roar. I began to run, and I heard the sound of paws hitting the ground close behind. When I turned around, I was looking up into the face of a creature now standing on 2 legs. The creature bellowed again and then took off. I could not risk having that experiment known as Strain 13 become a weapon. After that, I went back to the lab, erasing all the research data that I had on my end. When I arrived home that night, I found the door to my house had been torn off its hinges. Inside, the house had been ransacked. Drawers were thrown on the floor, turned upside down, papers everywhere. I ran to my office, my computer, hard drive. Everything was gone. The printer as well. I figured whoever it was knew what they were looking for. That was when I remembered that my last computer file contained the location of Project Excalibur and the name of its test animal, but it was too late to change anything. I heard the sound of a car engine. I saw an old gray Ford pickup pulling up behind my car. In the darkness, all I could see was an old man sitting behind the wheel staring at me. When he got out of the truck, I realized it was Dr. Charles, one of the lead scientists from the lab. Walking up to me, he began shouting, "You have to get out of here." He informed me that a military team had discovered the woman's body a short distance from the compound. The dead woman was to be found in later stages of transformation. They also discovered that all of the trees within the radius of the compound had bizarre markings all over their trunks. The team quickly recovered the body, destroying all evidence of the markings. When they went back to the compound to collect the research, Dr. Charles had added this. "That's when they discovered that it was you who destroyed your portion of data. It is time for you to go." So I stood there for a moment in panic, got in my car, and I left Washington altogether. Now, I'm a fugitive on the run with nowhere to go. There is a cabin in the remote wilderness of California. I called my sister and told her I was using it not to let anyone know. What I didn't know was the military was actively monitoring my cell phone and located my sister in California, threatening her with prison time if she did not give up the information that she knew about me and my whereabouts. She was scared and told them where they can find me. The following day I was arrested and brought back to the Puget Sound facility. When I arrived there, I learned the military had captured the creature and it was now being held at a secret facility in Nevada. The virus, Strain 13, did change the bear into a smarter and stronger species. Other government scientists now wanted to study the creature to learn more about the virus. They want to try and reverse the effects of the virus so it could be used to create more stronger bioweaponry. After 6 months of confinement, they've decided to let me go free. There was no trial. It was completely handled by the shadow government, as many call them. I won't say where I'm located at now, but it is far from the state of Washington. You can choose to believe this or not. I don't care, but this is my story.
Torchlight. There's an old urban legend in my town. As the story goes, sometime in the early 80s, a hiker got lost in the wilds. All through the night, people in nearby camps saw his torchlight, but never responded. He was presumed dead months later. From then on, they say at night near the brush or in nearby towns, a torchlight with no apparent source could be seen, a remnant of the hiker trying to get out. Over the years, the tale took on a sinister tone, bringing with it an aura of dread as it's mentioned. When I heard the story, I laughed. Such terror for a ghost who shone a torch? It was ridiculous. How wrong I was. It all started with a dare. I dare you to go out into the forest and summon the hiker. Davy held the torch under his chin, shadows dancing in a hideous mask. Psst, I scoffed. A silly ghost story. That's not even scary. There were 5 of us. Davy, Anna, Mace, Katrina, and me, sprawled in various positions on Davy's bedroom floor. Our costumes laid around the room, mixing with old socks and half-finished mugs of tea. Kat stuffed her mouth with another handful of Halloween candy into her mouth. Her chewing filled the otherwise silent room. After a pause, Davy continued. Well, if you think it's fake, then prove it. Fine, but you all have to come with me to see how stupid y'all are. We snuck out on the pretense of going for more candy and rode our bikes to the edge of the forest. The story specified that the torchlight and presumably the hiker only appeared on certain nights. But apparently, we were lucky. Not long after venturing into the murky trees, a flash of brilliant white began to dart through them. "Hey, Mr. Hiker," I called out. The light flashed, as though in acknowledgement. We chased the light deeper into the forest, our torchlights flashing, becoming increasingly erratic. Suddenly, it stopped. A blanket of darkness descended around us, suddenly endless and suffocating. I could feel Davy's breath on my neck, and Anna's had a grip on my arm. Mace's squeal disappeared into the trees. A faint sound came from far away, slowly getting closer. A faint scuffing sound, like shoes over carpet. The scuffling became a scraping, the leaves cracking under its touch. The scraping became a canopy of cracking trees and falling debris, as a frenzied, panting voice charged towards us. "Run!" Kat's voice snapped me out of my trance, as Anna dragged me from the trees. As I ran, a slice of moonlight illuminated our pursuer. I almost threw up. The creature was snow white and hairless from head to toe, comically enlarged arms reaching out for us, tipped in blood-stained claws. A tattered outfit and backpack hung perilously off its frame, a hiking backpack. So the hiker hadn't perished at all. Mace was the first to die. He tripped on a tree root, face planting into the soil. The hiker reached him moments later, tearing him apart with his claws. A spray of something warm and wet pelted my back as Mace screamed and screamed and screamed. Anna and Kat were next. Kat was slowing, getting tired. The monster took her too, this time savagely ripping her apart like a doll. Anna pushed me away as her foot caught on another root and something tripped, her eyes pleading with me to run. I sprinted through the forest alone, branches and thorns ripping into my skin. Tears ran down my face, mingling with dirt. My heart pounded in my throat, and I felt a phantom breathe on my back. I whimpered, convinced that the hiker was behind me. I felt heavy as my foot met air and crashed down with a sickening crack, as my leg erupted in pain. I squeezed my eyes shut, expecting claws in my flesh at any moment. After a few seconds of silence, I opened my eyes. The hiker watched me. Its face was haggard and pale, his eyes pitch black, puddles of emptiness. It opened and closed its mouth, revealing red stained teeth, and turning away, sprinting into the forest. In the end, the sheriff found me and took me home. I was taken to a hospital to get my leg fixed, and found that Davy was found alive and whole, but was in shock in a ditch at the outskirts of the forest. They ruled the others as an animal attack. Years passed, my leg healed, and we moved away from our remote country town. I settled down, got a job, started a family, but I never forgot the hiker nor the torchlight. I researched whenever I could, piecing together old cases and possible culprits. Soon, I had part of the picture complete. What the stories don't say is that the hiker, which my research reveals to be one Moses Parker Smith, never had his body recovered. The attacks, a string of brutal mutilations of people in the surrounding area ruled as animal attacks, began soon after. My cursed adventure was only one in a long line of mysterious deaths. But then life got in the way. COVID hit, and I was left scrambling to adapt to the changing world. I didn't notice until it was far too late to realize that similar attacks were being reported farther and farther from the forest. One night, I saw a torchlight flashing in the distance from my window. At first, I dismissed it as some kids messing around. Then poor Amara Green was ripped to pieces 2 miles from her house. I haven't mentioned one detail of my research yet. Everyone who was present during the hiker's attacks died, except me and Davy. I don't know why he let us live that fateful night, but he's coming to finish the job. For the torchlight isn't a cry for help. It's a warning. Figure by the edge of the forest. I woke up this morning feeling positive for a change. I have been down ever since the passing of my twin sister. The feeling of something being missing is still hanging heavily inside my heart. But things must go on. I opened the door and walked towards my red mailbox. I haven't been checking my mail since I came back home from the funeral, to be precise. I haven't been out of my house a lot. I have been battling with depression ever since I got the call from a hysterical Johnny with the news of my sister's passing. It's like I could still feel her presence, her pain, her thoughts. I even adapted a few of her habits over the past 6 months. But today, I decided I should move on for the both of us. She would have wanted me to be happy, which reminds me, I need to check on Johnny. I haven't heard from him since the funeral. I took a deep breath and opened my mailbox. Strange, there was only one big brown envelope, the kind you would get important documents in. I took it out and scanned the paper. No address, nor a return address. Only my name written in some weird red substance that kind of had a strange sour smell. The handwriting looks strangely familiar, but I cannot think where I had seen it before. I closed the mailbox and walked towards my house. But for a brief second, I felt like someone was watching me. I had turned around and I looked but saw nothing. I shook off the feeling and made my way inside the house. Once inside, I took a seat on the sofa, opening the envelope. A cold shiver went down my spine as I read the context of the first page. My sister's missing diary pages were now in my hands. I took a deep breath and began to read the pages. April 8th, 2022, Friday, 4 p.m. Dear Diary, the strangest thing happened today. I saw a figure by the edge of the forest watching me from a distance. He was dressed in a black robe of some sort. His face was covered in a white mask. I spent a good 5 minutes just staring at it from my living room window. I called out to Johnny, but when he got to the window, he said he didn't see anyone. And sure enough, when I turned my attention back towards the figure, it was gone. I'm not sure what to think. Nat. April 9th, 2022, Saturday, 4 p.m. Dear Diary, I saw the figure by the edge of the forest again, standing there, just watching me. Judging me as I'm sure it's the neighbor's children playing a prank on me. But somehow, I cannot shake the feeling of it being something more sinister. Nat. April 18th, 2022, Monday, 3:30 p.m. I haven't been writing much, haven't seen the figure either. Maybe it was all a fragment of my imagination. Nat. April 19th, 2022, Tuesday, 1:30 a.m. Dear Diary, I woke up to a sound by my window. It sounded like knocking. Johnny is fast asleep next to me. I'm not sure how he cannot hear it. Is it my imagination? Oh gosh, it sounds like scratching. I'm going to wake Johnny up and I'm sure someone is there. April 20th, 2022, Wednesday, 2:45 p.m. Dear Diary, last night I woke up Johnny because of the noise by the window when he went outside to check it. There was nothing there. No trace of scratches on the window, no footprints in the mud, nothing. I'm losing my mind. Nat. April 24th, 2022, Sunday, 13:40. Dear Diary, I went for a jog in the forest to clear my head, something my therapist described to me to do along with my anxiety pills. I haven't seen the figure nor heard any sounds. Maybe it was the stress about the wedding getting to me. Nat. April 27th, 2022, Wednesday, 17:30. Dear Diary, I got a strange note with my mail. No address, no return one either. Just a letter written in a strange red substance saying, 48 hours left. I'm not sure what to think of it. Nat. With shaking hands, I read the last diary entry, with tears falling freely. My sister's death was ruled out as a suicide. But why do I have proof of a murder sitting in my hands? As I moved my hand to wipe away the falling tears, the pages fell to the floor. That's when I noticed the note written in the same red substance behind the last diary page. 5 minutes. As I looked out my living room window, I could see a figure dressed in a black robe with a white mask. With shaking hands, I dialed 911. But the only sound I got back from the phone was, "Your time is up." Something followed me around my basement, and it's finally gone upstairs. I've always told my friends that my house is haunted. It used to be a joke. Used to be. My basement had always had an odd feeling to it. It makes weird noises. The temperature fluctuates constantly. And then there are the echoes. Sometimes, when I walk around, I hear something walking right behind me. I assumed it was the echoes at first, but it never happened on a consistent basis. Regardless of the numerous perfectly rational explanations for what could be causing the footsteps, it creeped me out so much I began a ritual of sprinting up the stairs. throwing open the door and shutting it behind me as fast as I could whenever I heard them. Thankfully, they never followed me up. Until last week. My neighbor was experiencing a power outage at night due to high winds, and my phone was about to run out of charge. I remembered a battery charger I had stored in the basement after a hiking trip. Now, I wasn't thrilled about having to run downstairs in the dark, but I was bored and didn't want my phone to die. At first, everything was fine. I was rummaging around looking for my charger, getting frustrated with myself for not remembering exactly where I had put it. The wind was raging outside, so I didn't hear them at first. The footsteps were walking on their own, and they were coming towards me. As they got louder, I was alerted to their presence and forced myself to turn around. Nothing but darkness. I bolted upstairs, with the footsteps close to my trail but slightly out of sync with my own. It sounded like a heartbeat. Thump, 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 thump. I made it to the top, opened the door, and slammed it shut behind me. I heard something bang into the wood, followed by footsteps getting fainter. Had it gone back down? I breathed a sigh of relief. F that shit. I moved a chair under the doorknob just in case. A couple of days ago, I decided to invite some friends of mine over to stay the night. We had been watching old paranormal shows and wanting to conduct our own investigation. I offered up my basement. I hadn't been back since the power outage. We brought a temperature reader, spirit box, and headlamps, as well as we brought our own cameras and flashlights. Looking back, it was certainly overkill and a little ridiculous, but the humor of it eased my fears of returning to the basement. I wanted my house back. 2 of my friends stayed upstairs and the other 3 went down into the basement with me. We were cracking jokes in the lead-up, but it was clear that the mood was tense. We moved the chair out from under the doorknob, and we carefully opened the door and peered inside. Everything looked normal. I let out a sign. At least the thing hadn't trashed my stuff. Slowly, we all made our way down the stairs. We left the lights off and used flashlights to see in front of us. After about a half an hour of fiddling with the temperature reader and the spirit box and getting no significant results, we were about to call it a night. That was until we realized our mistake. We had left the basement door open. We hadn't heard from the 2 friends we left since we entered the basement, but we were so caught up in our own investigation we hadn't even noticed. The 4 of us practically threw ourselves up the stairs, calling their names the entire way up. They never responded. We made our way up, only to find an empty room. Our friends had disappeared entirely. No screams, no loud noises, nothing. The police never found them. Every few days, another person goes missing. In the lead up to their disappearance, some of the victims reported hearing footsteps behind them. Every time they appear, they got louder. Please, lock your doors, and if you hear something walking right behind you, run. I'm sorry.